I would like to welcome all to our little gathering. This is the San Diego Ramana group, and today is May 4th. May the 4th be with us all, which is the first Sunday of the month, which Michael James is with us, our renowned authority on what brings us to our understanding, to our oneness here. And so Michael, good morning.
Good morning.
And if we begin with our first question is from a YouTube comment, which says, I'm watching the last San Diego Satsang video, and there you said that when asked whether we should attend to the ego or to the self, Bhagavan would often say to attend to the ego. However, when you were answering Joanne's question and many other times, you explained that in order to have a clear understanding of what Atma-vichara is, we only need to attend to ourselves. Even though attending to the ego and attending to ourselves is in effect the same thing, snake rope analogy, I feel that some may find it a little confusing because we all know right now is ego, the snake. So saying attend to ourselves would be impossible and would be like asking us to see the rope when all we can see right now is a snake. My point is, and please do correct me if I'm mistaken, for all of us who are not awakened, and I guess that would be the majority of us, wouldn't it be better to stick to the idea of attend to ego / I thought, look carefully at the snake instead of attend to yourself / pure awareness until we see that it never was a snake, but a rope?
Right. Okay. So that is the question. For practicing Atma-vichara, self-investigation, obviously we can't practice it properly if we don't understand clearly what it is we are to do. Not that it is a doing, but we need to have a clear understanding of the fundamental principles of Bhagavan's teachings. If we understand that, then the practice will be clear to us. If our understanding is not so clear, the practice will be not so clear to us. So understanding is not our aim, but understanding is is part of the means towards that aim. Our aim is to know ourselves as we actually are. That doesn't involve understanding, that involves clear awareness of ourselves as we actually are. But in order to obtain that clear awareness of ourselves as we actually are, we need to investigate ourselves. And in order to investigate ourselves, we need to have a clear understanding. One of the important things to understand is just as if we see a rope and mistake it to be a snake, what seems to be a snake is actually a rope. Likewise, what seems to be ego is actually just pure awareness. In other words, ego is pure being awareness, I am, conflated with adjuncts. It's only the conflation of adjuncts that makes ego seem to be something separate from what we actually are. But in our experience, we all experience just one I. This one I that we experience is now mixed and conflated with adjuncts. That is, we are aware of ourselves, not just as I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this person, I am this body, I am Michael, or I am whatever our name happens to be given to this body, we identify with that name. So we identify ourselves with a particular name and form. Whatever we identify ourselves with is what in Sanskrit is called adjunct, is called upadhi, which is generally translated as adjunct, but we need to understand the sense in which this word is used. That is, upadhi is something that another thing is mistaken to be. So we mistake ourselves to be this person. So this person is an adjunct. And by identifying ourselves as this person, we impose limitations upon ourselves. Another meaning of upadhi is limitation. So this false identity is what makes us as ego seem to be different from the pure being awareness that we actually are. One of the fundamental principles of Advaita Vedanta is what is called Jiva Brahmaikya. That is the oneness of Jiva and Brahman. Brahman is what we actually are, the pure Satchidananda, pure being, awareness, happiness. That is what we actually are. That is infinite and indivisible, one infinite, indivisible whole. But now, as ego, because we have identified ourselves as this body, we've imposed limitations upon ourselves. So we seem to be something other than the infinite being awareness that we actually are. But though we seem to be something different, we are always only that. So what we now experience as I seems to us to be ego because of this false identification, the adjunct that we have conflated with I. But what this I actually is pure satya, pure being awareness. If we understand this clearly, questions such as the questions that people often ask Bhagavan, what is the I that we have to attend to? Is it ego or is it the self? These questions would not arise. The reason why Bhagavan generally replied to such questions saying ego is because it was clear that the very fact that someone had asked that question meant they didn't understand that what seems to be ego is actually pure awareness, pure being awareness. Because they didn't understand that, Bhagavan said, attend to ego. Because that's all that they're able to grasp. But if we go into this practice, the deeper we go into this practice, the clearer it will become to us that there is no difference whatsoever between attending to ego and attending to what we actually are, because ego is what we actually are, just seeming to be something other. So whether we look at the snake or at the rope, we're looking at the same thing. Even when we think it is a snake, it is always actually only a rope. So it's not that we're seeing the rope and therefore, it's not that we're seeing the snake and therefore not seeing the rope. We're always seeing the rope, but we're seeing the rope as a snake. So if we understand this oneness of as I said, well, Jiva Brahmaikya means the oneness of Jiva. Jiva means ego. No, the soul. The literal meaning of Jiva is soul, but that is a synonym for ego. This ego is nothing other than the one infinite reality, but seems to be something other because of these limitations. If we understand this clearly, as I say, there'll be the question of whether we should attend to ego or the self won't arise, because it's clear that ego is nothing but the self, seeming to be something other than what it actually is. And even this term, the self, that is so commonly used in English translations, itself is a rather misleading term. Because as soon as we say the self, we are reifying it, we're making it into a thing. But the self, what is called the self with a capital S, is nothing other than ourself. It's better to talk about ourself. In English, generally when we use the word self in English, self is a pronoun. Self doesn't refer to any particular thing. That is, everything is itself. I am myself, you are yourself, he is himself, she is herself. The table is itself, the microphone is itself. So self is not a separate thing. It's just it's a pronoun that refers. It's a way of referring to something. I and myself are one and the same thing. There's not I and the self. So we need to understand the oneness of but we are always one. And what we are to attend to is that one I that we experience ourselves as. Now that one I happens to be mixed and conflated with adjuncts. But as Bhagavan says very clearly in a passage recorded in Maharsha's Gospel, Bhagavan explains that ego is called Chit Jada Granti. Chit means awareness, pure awareness. Jada means what is not aware. And Granti means a knot. So it's a knot formed by the entanglement of awareness with what is not aware. The awareness is I am, which is our being. What is not aware is this body. This body means not only this physical body, but as Bhagavan says, all the five sheaths. The five sheaths means the physical body, the life that animates that body, and the mind, intellect, and will that operate within that body. So these five are often referred to as the five sheaths. So these five sheaths constitute the body that we take ourselves to be. That is, we never experience ourselves as a dead body. It's always a living body. So the life is implicit there when we say I am the body, the life is implicit there. And we never experience ourselves as a sleeping body. It's always a body that seems to be awake. That is, even in dream, the body that we experience as I in dream seems to be awake. When we're dreaming, we seem to be awake. So because we're awake, the mind, intellect, and will are operating within it. So we always experience these five collectively as the body that we take ourselves to be. So all these five are jada. Jada means they're not aware. What is aware is ego. That is, no person, if we call for short, let's call these five sheaths a person, because that's what makes up our identity. But no person is aware. What is aware is the ego that is aware of itself as I am this person. Because I mistake myself to be this person, and because I am aware, this person seems to be aware. But actually, what is aware is not any of these five sheaths. It is only I, the ego. So ego is called Chit-Jada-Granti because it's a conflation of the awareness, I am, and these adjuncts, namely this body consisting of 5 sheaths. So, as I say, in this passage recorded in Maharsha's Gospel, Bhagavan explains this, that ego is called Chit-Jada-Granti. In other words, it's for adjunct conflated awareness. I am this body. I am is Chit, the body is Jada, and the entanglement of these two is the Granti, the knot. So Bhagavan says, in your investigation into the source of the ahamvriti, sorry, in that passage they happen to use a mixture of English and Sanskrit terms. Ahamvriti, aham means I, vritti means a mental impression or mental phenomenon. So a vritti is a thought, we can say. It's not thought is not quite an adequate term, but it's the closest term we have in English to vritti. So aham vritti means the I thought. In other words, ego. So Bhagavan says, in your investigation into the source of the aham vritti, you take the essential chit aspect of ego. And therefore, it will unfailingly lead you to the pure awareness that you actually are. So when we're investigating ourselves, what we're investigating, even if we consider that we're investigating ego, we're only investigating the chit aspect of ego. We're not investigating the adjuncts. We're investigating the fundamental, the essential. Bhagavan said that the essential chit aspect, because that is the essence of ego. The adjuncts may change. This body was once a young body, a small child playing around, and now it's grown up and it's undergone so many changes, and one day it's going to die. So the adjuncts are changing, but the I that is aware of itself as I am these adjuncts is the same. So that is what we're investigating, the essential chit aspect. We're investigating I. That essential chit aspect is what we actually are. So even when we're investigating ego, we're investigating ourselves. So however we view it, that is, Bhagavan has explained this practice in so many different ways. Sometimes he likened it to the dog following the scent of its master. Wherever the master may be, if the dog follows that scent, it will surely lead it. You'll surely lead the dog to his master. So likewise, if this ego or I thought is like the scent of a dog. If we follow this, it will lead us back to the source. What is the source? The source is our being, what we actually are. So, but that is like saying, if you look carefully at the snake, it will lead you unfailingly to a rope. These are all different analogies, but we need to understand that all these different analogies are pointing at essentially the same thing. So if we look at ego carefully enough, just like if we look at the snake very carefully, we'll see, oh, it's not a snake, it's just a rope. Likewise, if we attend to ego carefully enough, we'll see it is not actually ego, it is just pure awareness. In the question it is said, but if we say that we're investigating pure awareness, it may be confusing for some people. It may be confusing for people who lack a clear understanding of this principle of the oneness of Jiva and Brahman. That is the oneness of ego and what we actually are. But what the reality of ego, what ego essentially is just that pure being awareness, Satchit. So if we understand that, this won't be confusing. For some people, it may be confusing. That's why when Bhagavan was asked, should we attend to ego or to the self? Because he understood, because it was clear from the question that the questioner lacked a clear understanding of this oneness of Jiva and Brahman, but oneness of ego and the self. Bhagavan said attend to ego. Just like if we suppose we're walking along a dark path in the dusk, we're walking with Bhagavan, and we see something lying on the path that looks to us like a snake. And we say, oh, Bhagavan, Bhagavan, there's a snake, we shouldn't go any further. Bhagavan knows very clearly that it's not a snake, it's just a rope. So he assures us, no, it's not a snake, it's just a rope. But to us, it still looks like a snake, so we're afraid of it. So Bhagavan knows the only way to dispel our fear is for us to see it as it actually is. So he says, look at it carefully. And if we then ask Bhagavan, which it should I look at? Should I look at the snake or at the rope? Bhagavan will say, look at the snake, because for us it looks like a snake. But actually what we're looking at is only a rope, even when we think it's a snake. So this will be confusing only to people who lack a clear understanding. And if we lack a clear understanding, we're likely to be not practicing it correctly. So it's very important to understand this. But what seems to be ego is nothing but pure awareness. If we understand that, then whether we think we're attending to ego or attending to pure awareness, we'll know they're one and the same thing. That is, we're not attending to the adjuncts of ego. We're not attending to the jada, the non-aware portion, the body or mind. We're attending only to the essential chit aspect, the essential awareness aspect of ego. So this shouldn't be confusing to us if we understand Bhagavan's teachings clearly and correctly. And having a clear understanding of Bhagavan's teachings is very, very important if we want to go deep in this practice. Some people say, "Oh, I'm not interested. I don't want to get just to have more concepts. I want to just do the practice." But the concepts Bhagavan gives us are very, very simple concepts. They're not complicated. That is, if we understand, in fact, if we understand and accept the basic principles of Bhagavan's teachings, it will dispel so many unnecessary concepts from our mind. People who have difficulty understanding Bhagavan's teachings, and particularly people who have difficulty understanding what the practice is, it's because they've got too many concepts in their mind, too many preconceived ideas. So when we come to Bhagavan, we have to grasp a few very simple principles. And these principles, once they're pointing out to us, are actually very, very obvious. It's just we overlook them. Once it's pointed out to us, if we grasp that, then we have to jettison so many unnecessary ideas that we had previously. So Bhagavan's teachings will simplify our understanding, reduce the number of concepts that we have in our mind. It's not, as Bhagavan said, in this path, it's not so much a matter of learning as unlearning. So we will unlearn many of the unnecessary concepts, we'll jettison many of the unnecessary concepts and have a clear and simple understanding of Bhagavan's teachings. So to understand Bhagavan's teachings, we just need a certain clarity and subtlety of understanding. It's not a complicated thing. It's not like some philosophies or some science or mathematics are things which are very complicated, or some even theology, religion, full of complicated, so many unnecessary beliefs. Bhagavan's teachings are extremely simple. But though they're extremely simple, many people fail to grasp them because they they're not ready to give up all their preconceived ideas and see the obvious truth in Bhagavan's teachings. So understanding his teachings is clearly understanding his teachings, and not misunderstanding, understand clearly and correctly, is a prerequisite for putting them into practice correctly. Because if we don't understand them correctly, how can we practice them correctly? So it is worth spending time thinking carefully about what Bhagavan has taught us, trying to understand, trying to simplify our understanding, and then applying that simple understanding in practice. One question many people ask is how to practice this, how to practice this. We can't, that is, how to practice it is very clear and very obvious, will be very clear and very obvious to us if we understand the basic principles of the teachings. If it's not clear to us what the practice is, that means we haven't really understood the teachings. So understanding the teachings is a necessary prerequisite. Then there'll be no room for confusion because Bhagavan's teachings are so simple. Even a child can understand them. I mean, it's so simple. But very wise and very learned people fail to understand them because their minds are full of so many other ideas and beliefs and preconceptions and everything. So I think in the Bible it is said, unless you become like little children, you will not enter the kingdom of God. I don't know what that meant in the original, but how I apply it here, we have to have the simple understanding, the simple understanding that even a child can understand. Such simple understanding we need, but a simple understanding will be a clear understanding. The more concepts we have in our mind, the more confusion we have. So we need to jettison all our old beliefs and understand the basic principles of Bhagavan's teachings, understand what it is he's talking about, what it is he's asking us to do. Then it will be very clear. Then it's a matter of putting it into practice. Practice is the most important thing, but we need to know what we are practicing. Once we've clearly understood what the practice is, which is just to keep our attention on ourself, whether ourself means ego or Brahman, doesn't matter. We're all aware I. We need to attend to I. That's all there is to it. What is most important is the practice. Yes, what I was going to say is, once we've clearly understood the practice, and we begin practicing it, then we come up against the real difficulty. The real difficulty, understanding the practice is not difficult. Applying it in practice is difficult. Why? Well, it's not actually difficult. As Bhagavan said, it's actually the easiest of all things. But why it seems difficult to us is because of our lack of willingness. Because when we attend to ourselves, we as ego thereby subside. So attending to ourself is itself self-surrender. Self-investigation and self-surrender, though Bhagavan sometimes spoke of them as if they were two paths, he made it very clear that in order to go deep in the path of surrender, the only way, that is, we can, to some extent, we can surrender our will. We can give up our likes and dislikes and desires and attachments, accept whatever happens is the will of God. That's the beginning of surrender. But we cannot give up our will entirely without giving up the one whose will it is, namely ego. And the only way to give up ego, surrender ego, which is what self-surrender is about, the self in self-surrender, or Atma-samapanam, that self or Atman, there refers to ego. That is what we need to surrender. And the only way to surrender it is to attend to it. Because the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to things other than itself. but to subside and dissolve back into its source by attending to itself. This is the great, unique clarification Bhagavan has given us that hasn't been clarified in any of the ancient texts or any of the ancient books. None of them have explained this so clearly as Bhagavan has. The nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to things other than itself, but to subside and dissolve back into its source by attending to itself. So, since attending to ourself means the dissolution of ourself as ego, it means complete and permanent surrender of ourself. We are unwilling to do so because we still have so many desires and attachments, so many likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and so on. These are all these likes, dislikes, desires, attachments in their seed form are what are called Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya means phenomena, objects, and vasanas means inclination. So the inclination to constantly experience phenomena, in other words, constantly experience things other than ourselves, that is what is called Vishaya vasanas. And these Vishaya vasanas are the seeds that give rise to all the likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and everything else. So, because our Vishaya vasanas are still strong, we are unwilling to let go. We're unwilling to surrender ourselves completely. So when we try to attend to ourselves, we will keep on trying to grasp other things, attend to something. We'll try to attend to anything other than to ourselves because we're not yet willing to surrender. We're not yet willing to let go entirely. So this is when the real spiritual practice begins, the real self-investigation, because we are then up against our own lack of willingness, our own lack of love. That is, we all say we want to know and be what we actually are, but there's a price to pay. The price to be paid is this ego. We have to surrender ego. And surrendering ego means surrendering everything. Because as Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uludunapadu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Everything means all phenomena. So the entire world, mind, thoughts, everything, all phenomena of all kinds, they come into existence only when ego comes into existence. Why is that? Because they all exist only in the view of ego. So they don't exist at all independent of ego. This world has no existence independent of ego because it appears only in the view of ego. So, as he says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. That is, the whole of this universe is nothing but an expansion of ego. Ego is, as ego, we are seeing ourselves as all this multiplicity. Just like when we dream, we see ourselves as a dream world and all the people in it and the events happening in it. It's all nothing but ourself. We are seeing as all that. So ego itself is everything. And then he concludes that verse by saying, therefore, investigating what this is giving up everything. Investigating what this is means investigating what ego is. If we investigate ego, ego will subside. And when ego subsides, everything subsides. So we have to be willing to give up everything. Then only we can succeed in this path. So the difficulty we face is not that it's actually there's nothing simpler than to attend to ourselves. It's the simplest thing, easiest thing there is. But it seems to us very difficult because of our lack of willingness. That is why patient and persistent practice is necessary for as long as it takes. Because the more we attend to ourselves, the more the Vishaya vasanas will be weakened, and the opposite vasana, the Sat vasana, the inclination just to be as we actually are, to hold on to our being and thereby be as we actually are, that Sat vasana will increase in strength, and the Vishaya vasanas will decrease in strength. When the Sattvasana becomes strong enough, in other words, when the love to be what we actually are becomes strong enough, then we will be able to attend to ourselves keenly enough to see what we actually are. As soon as we experience ourselves, as soon as we're aware of ourselves as we actually are, ego, which is a false awareness of ourselves, will be destroyed. And when ego is destroyed, everything else is destroyed, and we alone will remain. As Bhagavan describes it in verse 28 of Upadesha as Anadi, Ananta, Akanda, Satchidananda. Anadi means beginningless. Ananta means endless or limitless, infinite. Akanda means unbroken, undivided, indivisible. Satchidananda. Satchitananda means being, awareness, happiness, which are all one and the same thing. They're not three different things. It's our own being, our own awareness. It's the very nature of our being is happiness. The very nature of our being is awareness, pure awareness. Not awareness that knows other things, but pure awareness. Awareness that knows nothing other than itself. So I hope that's a clear and helpful answer to that question. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask on this subject? Was it clear what I explained?
I have a question, Michael.
Yes.
So is what we're looking at the act of looking?
No, we're looking at the one who is looking. The act
Okay.
of looking, the act of looking is there has to be one who is looking in order for there to be an act of looking.
So we are investigating, and investigating the self, we are investigating
The seer, the knower,
the sphere, the
yeah.
knower, which is pure awareness.
Which is pure. Well, no, pure awareness is not the experiencer. Ego is the experiencer, but pure awareness is the reality of ego. What ego essentially is. That is, it's only as ego, but we see anything, hear anything, experience anything. As pure awareness is awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. That's why it's often called Satchit, being awareness. That is the nature of true awareness, is just to be, without knowing anything other than itself.
Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you.
And Bruce has his hand up.
Yeah, I did a direct message to you, Michael, and commenting on the the confusion of the seeing the snake instead of rope, which is so important in the teaching. It's also, and you did touch on it, the idea of it being at dusk, that we're, so what you're saying is that the occlusion of our attention by the adjunct awareness is what is diminishing our capacity to see clearly,
Yes.
if that makes sense.
Yes, because as soon as we see ourselves as a person, we become aware of so many other things. And our survival as this person depends upon acquiring so many things. We need air to breathe, we need water to drink, we need food to consume, we need clothing to keep ourselves warm or to ward off the heat of the sun or whatever. As this body, we are dependent on so many other things. So all the desires arise, and then our attention is constantly going outwards. So we create a confusion for ourselves simply by mistaking ourselves to be something other than what we actually are.
So, for example, all right, in my life, I have a wife, and my wife wanted me to rebuild the bathroom. okay, for the house, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, it seems so mundane and obvious, all right? But literally, I took everything down to zero, destroying everything,
Mm.
down to zero, and then rebuilt it. So every single thing that was put into that bathroom, the body, if you want to call it, of Bruce, put those things into place. And because of identification with ego, I put those tiles into place.
Right,
I
right.
did this. I did
Exactly,
that.
exactly.
But the reality is that the bathroom was rebuilt by the self. But in a sense,
Yes, yes. Well, the self doesn't actually do
right?
anything.
Of course, that's
Yeah,
what I mean.
yeah.
But the ego identifies it with.
Yeah, the bathroom was destined to be rebuilt, and the body that was destined to rebuild it was the body called Bruce. But because you're aware of
Yeah,
yourself as I am Bruce, therefore I did it. Doership is the
exactly,
very nature of ego. And the other flip
exactly.
side of doership is experiencership. So as Bhagavan says in verse 38 of
Exactly.
Ulladu, if we are the doer of actions, we will have to experience the resulting fruit. But when one knows oneself by investigating who is the doer of action, doership will depart and all the three karmas will come to an end. This is liberation, which is eternal.
Thank
So
you.
It,
That was
people
very
often
nice.
ask, how can I do without doership? Obviously, we can't. If we're doing, the doership is implicit there. So if we want to give up doership, we need to give up ego. But we also, along with that giving up the doership, we also have to give up the experiencership, because doership and experiencership are both the nature of ego. So we have to be ready to give up everything.
And
Bhagavan didn't
this is the
ask us.
letting go of the branch.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. For those who don't understand what Bruce means by that, an analogy Bhagavan sometimes gave was a person standing holding a branch and saying, "Oh, I'm bound to this branch." And a passerby said, "Why don't you just let go of the branch?" No, if I let go of the branch, I'll fall. But that person all the time is standing on the ground. They're unnecessarily holding on to a branch and thereby creating a seeming bondage for themselves. But the branch is not holding on to us. We are holding on to the branch.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
it seems that like that false identity cannot and will not give up the falseness of the identity.
Yeah. Well, it's not the identity that's at fault. It's the one who is identifying. That is the ego.
Exactly.
Yeah. That is, it is the nature of ego to take upon itself a false identity. And that false by doing so, that is bondage. And in order to be free of that bondage, we need to be free of ego. Because ego itself is bondage.
And that's the surrender.
That is surrender, exactly. Which can be, complete surrender is possible only by self-investigation. Because ego will subside, will let go of everything only when we attend to it. We seem to be ego so long as we're looking at other things, so long as we're attending to anything other than ourselves. But if we look within, there's no such thing as ego to be found. There's only just pure being awareness. But we need to look within keenly enough, deeply enough, to see ourselves as we actually are.
Well, it's in the duality or the multiplicity that can't achieve the non-dual. but the non-dual can recognize
That is the
that.
non-dual is permanent. Even now,
Exactly.
non-dual alone is the reality. But when we rise as ego, we create this duality, and we cling to this duality for our very survival as ego. So
And
we
when
need to
the
be.
and when the non-dual arises, the dual disappears.
Yes, yes, yes. But the root of the duality is ego. So we can get rid of duality only by getting rid of ego. And we can get rid of ego only by self-investigation. Bhagavan's teachings, if we understand them clearly, they're so, so simple. As I say, even a child can understand it. Whereas learned people, people who've read a lot, cannot understand it because they've got too many thoughts in their mind.
Well, that ego only creates distraction and confusion.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. That's its mission. All our problems are self-created.
Right.
we
Michael,
we are the problem, and we are also the solution. As ego,
exactly.
we have a problem. As we actually are, we have a solution.
Our truth,
Yes,
our oneness
yes,
is the solution.
exactly, exactly.
Michael, Daniel has his hand up. Would you
Yes,
like
yes, yes,
to
certainly.
address Daniel,
Yes.
or
Yeah, let's answer Daniel's question first.
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Hi. A few years ago, I experienced Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi. There was nobody in the world to know anything, just me. And I want to ask, practice of self-investigation is same as holding on to what I experienced in Nirvikalpa Samadhi? Can it be said like this?
Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi, is a state like sleep. It's a state where it's what is called manolaya, a temporary dissolution of mind. We achieve any temporary dissolution of mind by some means other than self-attentiveness. So sleep, for example, we attain sleep because we're too tired to continue mental activity. So, but due to tiredness, we subside in a state of manolaya, what we call sleep. We attain coma by having an accident or some injury or something. We attain general anesthesia by being subjected to some general anesthetic drugs. We attain what is called Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi by some yogic practices. The reason why none of these bring about the permanent dissolution of mind, the reason why all these states are called manolaya, which means temporary dissolution of mind, and not manonasa, destruction or permanent dissolution of mind, is because they're brought about by some means other than knowing ourselves as we actually are. The only means to bring about manonasa is to know ourselves as we actually are. And the only way to know ourselves as we actually are is self-investigation. So achieving Nirvikalpa Samadhi, this Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi, is of no benefit on the spiritual path. If we want to attain a permanent dissolution of mind, we have to investigate ourselves. The reason why other means bring the dissolution of mind brought about by other means is only temporary, is because when ego subsides in any state of manolaya, ego subsides, and then what remains in that state of manolaya is pure awareness. But that pure awareness doesn't destroy ego because ego has already subsided. The culprit has gone AWOL. He's absent. So you can't carry out the the death sentence for a criminal who has, if you don't know, if he's gone absent. So this is what happens in sleep and in Kevala Nirvikalpa and so on, Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi and so on. The ego subsides, and when ego subsides, what remains is the pure awareness. That is what we actually are. Whereas in the case of self-investigation, ego doesn't subside. If we're holding on to the self-attentiveness, that is, sometimes we fall asleep while investigating ourselves. It is not the self-investigation that brings about the sleep. It's the pramada. When we let go of the self-attentiveness, then only we fall asleep. So if we hold on to the self-attentiveness keenly enough, we as ego will experience ourselves as pure awareness. As soon as ego experiences itself as pure awareness, it ceases to be ego and remains as pure awareness. Because ego is the adjunct conflated awareness and this body. When it experiences itself as pure awareness, the ego as such is destroyed and the pure awareness alone remains. So it's only by self-investigation. So whatever practice you did to bring about the Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi, if you continue that practice, you'll continue experiencing Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But that's not the permanent solution. If you want to achieve permanent samadhi, eternal samadhi, as Bhagavan called it, sahaja samadhi, the natural samadhi, the only means is self-investigation. In fact, Bhagavan sometimes referred to this practice of self-investigation as the practice of sahaja samadhi, because it's the only way to bring about that. And sahaja samadhi is just a fancy name for sahaja samadhi means natural samadhi. In other words, it's nothing but our natural state, the state of pure being.
So basically,
self-investigation is the only way to achieve that. There's no other way. Sorry, you were about to ask something?
Yes, I wanted to ask. So basically, the only difference between Sahaja Samadhi and Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi is that Sahaja is forever,
yes,
and adjuncts Samadhi is just
temporary.
for some time.
Yeah.
Temporary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So basically, I get the glimpse of what I can expect from Sahaja Samadhi in future.
Even you don't have to experience Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi for that. We experience every day in sleep.
Mm-hmm.
There's no difference between Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi and sleep. The only difference is because Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi is brought about by some deliberate practices, the yogi who has experienced Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi will recognize that it was a state of pure awareness. But as Bhagavan pointed out, the same yogi will fail to recognize that sleep is exactly the same state of pure awareness. So that is the lack of clarity. So this experience, we can't achieve clarity from Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi. We bring temporary clarity because of the absence of ego, but that clarity achieved in Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi is lost as soon as ego rises again. Just as the clarity of sleep is lost as soon as we rise as ego when we wake up in the morning. So we need to experience that clarity here and now. We as ego need to experience that clarity, and then only will that clarity just bring about the permanent dissolution of ego. It will annihilate ego.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
All right. So should we go on to the next question?
Should we? Okay. There's a question from Michael. What is awareness?
Not this Michael, some other Michael.
Oh, not you.
Just to be confusing.
Yes, it confused me for a while. Michael asked, what is awareness, which is what we've been talking about all along.
Exactly.
But he goes on to ask, and what is consciousness, and how are they different?
Right. I'll start with the last question. How are they different? Awareness and consciousness are two words in English but mean essentially the same thing. They're sometimes used slightly differently in a different context, but essentially they're the same thing. So I wouldn't distinguish between the meaning of one word or the other word. I think often in many contexts it's clearest to use the word awareness, but it's synonymous with consciousness. It doesn't really matter which word we use. Both are the same. So what is consciousness or awareness? We are consciousness. That is, I am consciousness. That is the natural name of consciousness or awareness is I. In the context of Bhagavan's teachings and Advaita more generally, when we talk of awareness or consciousness, in the vast majority of cases, we're talking about what is aware. So if the simple answer to what is awareness or consciousness is what is aware is awareness. What is conscious is consciousness. There, of course, one was saying, I mean, being aware or being conscious is the same thing. But this is where the there is an important distinction, not in the words. It doesn't matter whether we use the word consciousness or awareness, but there is a very important distinction that Bhagavan pointed out, and that many people fail to grasp. Bhagavan distinguished two forms of awareness. That in Tamil, the terms that he generally used for awareness or consciousness were either arivu or unavu. These are two Tamil words that essentially mean the same, though they're used slightly differently in different contexts. But so he talked of sutarivu and sutatrarivu. Sutarivu means pointing. That's sutu means to point out, to show something. So the awareness that points out or shows, he calls sutarivu. And sutatrarivu is the awareness that doesn't show anything. So how I translate these in English is transitive awareness and intransitive awareness. What is meant by transitive, these are terms that are used in grammar. Verbs are either transitive or intransitive, or some verbs can be used transitively or intransitively. Transitive means a transitive verb is a verb that takes an object. So the boy kicked the ball. The ball is an object, so kick is a transitive verb. But the boy is standing. Standing doesn't take an object, so there it's an intransitive verb. Although we can use the same verb transitively. He stood the chair up. The chair had fallen over, he stood it up again. So sometimes the same verb can be used transitively or intransitively. But the essential meaning of transitive means what takes a direct object. Intransitive means what doesn't take a direct object. So if we apply this to awareness, transitive awareness, which is what Bhagavan calls sutarivu, is awareness of objects or phenomena. So being aware of anything is transitive awareness, whereas intransitive awareness is pure awareness. Pure awareness means awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself, of course. That we can't be aware without being aware of awareness. So pure awareness is aware of nothing other than itself, whereas that is intransitive awareness, whereas transitive awareness is awareness of other things. The nature, our real nature, what we actually are, is pure intransitive awareness. That is awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. Whereas the ego is transitive awareness. As ego, we always know things other than ourselves. So that is the important distinction that Bhagavan pointed out. This distinction is often overlooked. People talk of awareness without understanding this important distinction. We are all aware. The problem is we're not just aware, we're aware of things. We couldn't be aware of anything without being aware, but we can be aware without being aware of anything. Sleep is a very good example of this. In sleep, we're aware, but we're not aware of anything. In sleep, we're aware I am. We're aware of our own being. We're not aware of anything else. And our being obviously isn't the object of awareness. Awareness is aware of itself in sleep. So people say, oh, I didn't know anything in sleep. I wasn't aware of anything. Yes, we weren't aware of anything, but we were still aware. Understanding that distinction is very, very important, because understanding that will help us a lot in this practice of self-investigation. Because we're trying to achieve, by attending to ourselves, we are withdrawing our attention from all other things. And if we attend to ourselves keenly enough, we will end up being aware of nothing other than ourselves. In other words, awareness will be aware of nothing other than awareness, or we will be aware of nothing other than ourselves. That is the state of pure awareness, which is our real nature. As soon as we, as ego, experience ourselves as such, as that pure awareness, we will cease to be ego and remain as pure awareness. Until then, we need to persevere in this practice. Is that distinction clear to everyone?
You know, Michael, sometimes we can get so tied up in the words that we fail in the separateness of the words that we
Yes.
can fail to
Yes.
see the simplicity of the wholeness of the message.
That is, when we hear the words, words are just pointers. Words, that is the same words are understood by people, if everyone understands the same words in different ways. So if we are intelligent, if we have a clear mind, we will see what the words are pointing at. If we fail to see what the words are pointing at, it just adds. That's why so many people read Bhagavan's teachings but don't understand it, because they've already got so many ideas in their mind. They just add more ideas on top of those already existing ideas. So they fail, they read the words, but they fail to see what those words are pointing at. That is why Bhagavan said, the real teaching is not the teaching in words, but the teaching in silence. Only silence can reveal the truth, because silence is the very nature of the truth. When Bhagavan talks about silence, he's talking about the silence of pure being. That is what we are seeking to know, and that alone can reveal itself. The words are important as pointers, because our minds are going outwards. We need the words to point us back within. So we need to understand the words clearly in order to see what the words are pointing at. So we shouldn't we shouldn't reject the words, but at the same time we shouldn't get caught up in the words. We should see the words are all pointing at something. We should recognize what they're pointing at. Then the words will give clarity. If we fail to recognize what they're pointing at, they just add to the confusion.
Exactly.
So, for example, I was explaining the difference between transitive awareness and intransitive awareness. I used a lot of words for what is essentially a very, very simple idea, but it's an idea that many people fail to grasp, That's why I used a lot of words to try and make it clear. But some people will understand, some people won't understand. However many words, Bhagavan, people ask Bhagavan the same questions again and again and again. He replied in so many ways. But those who were able to grasp, grasped. Those who were not able to grasp, didn't grasp. But everyone will grasp, but we'll all grasp eventually. But it requires a certain, well, as Bhagavan said, according to the purity of the mind, the antakarana. Antakarana means inner instrument. According to the purity of the mind, the same teaching reflects in different ways. So we need to, that's why we shouldn't just be satisfied reading the teachings. We need to think carefully about it and try to make sense of it, try to understand what Bhagavan means by those words. That is what is called manana. That is, listening to the teachings or reading the teachings is called sravana. Sravana literally means hearing, but it means taking the teachings in. But having taken them in, we take in the words, we then need to make sense of the words. So making sense of it, understanding it clearly, what the words are pointing at, that process is called manana. And only if we've done sufficient manana, if we've really understood what Bhagavan is talking about, then only we can apply it in practice. And the more we go deep in the practice, the deeper our manana will go, the more clearly we'll be able to understand what Bhagavan's teaching, what Bhagavan is pointing at. That is, when we first read Bhagavan's teaching, we understand something, a little bit. We then try to put it into practice. The more we put it into practice, the more deeply we are able to understand it. So then when we read the same passage again, we're able to see more meaning, more implication in the same passage because of the practice we've done. So the practice is, the real clarity comes from the practice.
And that's in the experience.
Yeah, well, the experience comes via the practice. The practice is in order to experience ourselves as we actually are.
Yeah. And Marty has his hand up.
Thank
Marty.
you. Thank you, Mickey. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
I read something in Maharshi's Gospel the other night that really simplifies this for me, and I just want to make sure my understanding is correct. But the last sentence of this one paragraph said, "The experience of the self is being still." And when I try to I don't know if practice is the right word, be that, it eliminates all the understanding that I try to do and the interpreting of all the words, and it simplifies things tremendously. And there's no doing in this. It's just letting go of everything and being still.
Yes.
Is this correct? Or is this close? Or is this way out in left field?
No. This is very, very important. That is, the words that are translated there as being still, almost certainly the words Bhagavan would have used in Tamil is summa irupadu. Summa, we can take it as still, but it doesn't, it means just being or merely being. What he means by just being is being without rising as I. So self-investigation, what we are investigating is our being. And the only way to investigate being is by being. So when we attend to ourselves, as I was explaining earlier, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego subside. And to the extent to which we subside, we remain as mere being. So the being still or just being is brought about by self-attentiveness. So we are investigating being by being. This is why Bhagavan often clarified that self-investigation is not a doing, but a being. Because attending to anything other than ourself is a mental activity, so it's a doing. Whereas attending to ourself is a cessation of mental activity. Because to the extent to which we attend to ourself, we as ego subside. So when we subside, all mental activity subsides along with us. So attending to ourself is not doing, but just being. So understanding this is very, very important. And the more clearly we understand this, the deeper we'll be able to go within.
Well, so much of the conditioning is that we have to do in order to have, and there's that attachment to having and
Yes.
doing, and
Yeah.
that disallows the simplicity of the being.
Exactly.
There's a couple more hands,
But one thing,
Michael.
whatever we may be doing, there's never a moment when we are not being. That's why Bhagavan said, Summa iru, just be. Just be means be without doing. And in order to be without doing, we need to be without rising as ego. And in order to be without rising as ego, all we need to do is to attend to ourselves. To the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego subside and remain as pure being.
And therein lies the truth.
That is the truth. That is the truth itself. Pure being
that's
is
where-
the truth.
That's where the phrase in the Bible, be still and know that I am God.
Yeah, that's why Bhagavan often pointed out that. It's in the Psalms somewhere.
And Barack has his hand up.
Yes, Michael, just let me know if this perspective is in line. So the nature is as is. The stream, the water flows, the trees, they are as they are. So, and is it natural that we are as we are? And is that the oneness as well? Somewhere we kind of drift away. If nature had like an ego, then that would be drifting away from its true being.
When you say the river as it is, the trees are as they are all mental impressions. They have no existence independent of ourselves. So in order for us to be as we actually are, we need to cease rising as ego. Because when we rise as ego, we see ourselves as rivers, as trees, as cars, as buildings, as cities, as mountains, as all these things. It's nothing but ourself we are seeing as all these things. So we shouldn't look for the truth outside ourselves. The truth has to be found within ourselves. Because all objects or phenomena depend for their semi-existence upon the semi-existence of ourself as ego. Because it's only when we rise as ego that we're aware of all these things, that these things seem to us to exist. In sleep, no trees, no rivers, no mountains, no cars, no buildings, nothing appears to us. Nothing seems to exist in our view, because we haven't risen as ego. As soon as we rise as ego, all these things seem to exist. Whether in waking or in dream, all this is just an appearance. So the pure being, the being as we actually are, can be found only within ourselves. Is that a clear answer to your question?
Thanks, Michael.
Was that the answer you were expecting?
Yes, I'll have to.
Shall we move on
Yeah,
to
yes.
a third question?
Yes.
There's a YouTube comment. I feel that the formlessness is never caught hold of. It seems like one would need an anchor or a little mantra to regain remembrance. I use this very thought to guide me back into my investigation. Is that somewhat near what I should be doing?
Formlessness. If formlessness is an idea, then we can never catch hold of it. But if we recognize that we ourselves are formless, we have no form of our own, we seem to have a form only because we have identified ourselves as a body. So to hold on, to catch hold of formlessness means to catch hold of ourselves. So it is possible to catch hold of ourselves. But so long as there's an idea of formlessness, that is something other than ourselves. So we leave aside the concept of formlessness, leave aside all concepts. To whom do all these concepts appear? We need to hold on to ourselves. We ourselves are the anchor. That is, our being is the very center of everything. It is the heart. It is also the foundation of everything. It is the ground, the adhara, the adhisthana. So we need nothing other than to hold on to our being. Holding on to a mantra or anything else is diverting our attention away from ourselves. It's not wrong, but it's not necessarily going to help us in this practice. If the mantra is, for example, the name of Bhagavan or any other god that we are devoted to, there's no wrong in repeating that mantra, but we should remember that mantra is a name of God. That the reality of God is what is shining in our heart as I. That is why Bhagavan said, the first and foremost name of God is I or I am. All other names come after. Bhagavan said, even Om is second to I. Or sometimes he said, I is the elder brother, Om is the younger brother. So Om is supposed to be the most sacred name of God. But actually it's second to I. Because all experience is based on I. I is the foundation. It's the screen on which everything appears. It's the ground. It's the heart. It's the center. So the best mantra of all is, if you want a mantra, is I, because that takes us directly back to ourselves. But even that has to be dropped after some time if we want to go deep within. So I hope that was a helpful answer to that. That is, awareness, consciousness, which is what we actually are, has no form. But as soon as we think of formlessness becomes an idea. And then that can never be caught hold of, because we can't conceive of something without form, because all thoughts are forms. So trying to find formlessness is, as Bhagavan says, it's like taking a light to search for darkness. We'll never find it. Bhagavan says that in Arunachashtakam. So, but if we want to catch hold of formlessness, all we need to do is to catch hold of ourselves. Catch hold of our essence. Setting aside all concepts of formlessness or whatever, just being as we are.
Okay, let's go to the comments. Shiv, would you like to come in and read, or simply ask or make your comment? He's not coming in. Let me go back. He says, but to reach the source / self, the sense, thought of ego has to drop / dissolve. Then the snake disappears, so as the rope. Both the snake and the rope is an illusion. Ego is the very tendency of misidentifying. When one tries to do the so-called meditation / observation / drishta bhav, what's happening is not actual meditation / observation, but the thought of meditation / observation with its root as the I / ego thought. What happens is that you have two options left now. Constantly poking this ego, true I / self emerges, and the final thought, the ego dissolves. Thus, now is the only factor that was leading to appearance of the two dwat now gone. Hence, now there dawns the non-dual awareness. Have faith in Guru's words and give up the ego thought and be in this state of freedom till this state of freedom becomes the stateless state. This is the second step called focusing on the self. But it is basically the same as the first method. It's just that point of view is different.
Shall we, that's his first comment. Shall I first answer this and then we can go on to the next one?
Okay.
Because it's a long one.
Yeah.
Yes, in order to, he says, but to reach the source self, the sense thought of ego has to drop, dissolve. That is, ego will dissolve only when we're aware of ourselves as we actually are. So which comes first, being aware of ourselves as we actually are, or the dissolution of ego? They are one and the same thing. So we can't say but ego will not drop or dissolve until we're aware of ourselves as we actually are. And we will not be aware of ourselves as we actually are until ego has dissolved. They're one and the same thing. It's two ways of describing the same thing. Because ego is a false awareness of ourselves. It can be destroyed only by correct awareness of ourselves. In other words, being aware of ourselves as we actually are. Then he says, then the snake disappears, so as the rope. Both the snake and the rope is an illusion. Of course, the snake and the rope are an illusion, but this is, when we're talking about an analogy, this is an analogy. It's an analogy used to illustrate something. So, for the sake of the analogy, the snake is an appearance, the rope is real. Of course, ultimately, the rope is also unreal, but it's just an analogy. So, the snake will disappear only when we see the rope as it is. The disappearance of the snake and the seeing the rope as it is are one and the same thing. Just like the dissolution of ego and seeing ourselves as we actually are one and the same thing. That is, we cannot dissolve ego until we see ourselves as we actually are. And we cannot see ourselves as we actually are without thereby dissolving ego. Ego is the tendency of misidentifying. No, ego is not just a tendency. Ego is what misidentifies. So ego has a tendency to misidentify, but it is not the tendency. Ego is the I that identifies itself as I am this body. So it's not a mere tendency. It is the actual, that which misidentifies itself. And then he says, when one tries to do the so-called meditation observation, drishta bhav, I'm not sure what type of meditation he's referring to here. What's happening is not actual meditation observation, but the thought of meditation observation, with its root as the I ego thought. Okay, that's not very clear, because meditation, everyone has their own ideas of meditation. The real meditation, as Bhagavan says, meditation on the reality is being as we actually are. And we can be as we actually are only by attending to ourselves. And then he said there are two options: constantly poking this ego. What does it mean, poking ego? We have to attend to ourselves, or attend to ego, however we choose to call it. By attending to ourselves, ego subsides, and when ego subsides and dissolves, what remains is what we actually are. Thus now the only factor that was leading to the appearance of two, Dvaita, now gone, hence there dawns non-dual awareness. Yes, when we're aware of ourselves as we actually are, ego thereby dissolves, and all duality exists only in the view of ego. So with the dissolution of ego, duality dissolves, and non-duality alone remains. But even when ego was experiencing duality, non-duality was the underlying reality. Because both ego and the duality it's experiencing are both of unreal appearance. So attending to ourselves, that is the only option. But he says there's another option: have faith in Guru's words and give up ego thought and be in this state of freedom. How can we give up ego thought except by attending to ourselves? Bhagavan made it very clear. The only way to give up ego is to attend to ourselves. By attending to ourselves, ego subsides. And be in this state of freedom till this state of freedom becomes a stateless state. All we have to do is attend to ourselves. The more we attend to ourselves, the more we as ego will subside. When we attend to ourselves keenly enough and thereby experience ourselves as we actually are, ego will be found to be ever non-existent. That is the sahaja state, the eternal state. Nitama mukti nilay, as Bhagavan said, the state of liberation which is eternal. Thus, this second step is called focusing on the self. The first step also should be focusing on ourself is the first and last step in the path of self-investigation. There's no first step, second step, third step. From beginning to end, all we have to do is attend to ourselves. The more keenly we attend to ourselves, the more we subside. The more we subside, the closer we come to just being as we actually are. But it's basically the same as the first method, yes, except he rather inappropriately described the first method as poking ego. All we need to do is to attend to ourselves, no poking or anything. It's just that point of view is different. The only point of view in self-investigation, we are pointing our view, we're pointing our attention at ourselves. So there's no scope for any different points of view. We may approach the practice from different perspectives, from understanding from different perspectives, but the essential practice itself is only viewing ourselves, ahamukham, as Bhagavan said, facing I, facing inwards, or ahanokam, as he also referred to it, uh, looking within, seeing within.
Now Tina has her hand up.
Okay,
Tina?
yes.
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Before I got on this call, my ego was like screaming out like all these stories and stuff, and I sat on here and I went really quiet inside. So my question is about Viagra.
Yeah.
How to actually really increase Viagra when we're living in the world, when we're not a renunciant in like the ashram or wherever. Just what can you say about that to actually?
Okay.
I
Vairagya. Vairagya means freedom from passion, freedom from desire. You can go and live in an ashram. You can go and live in a cave in the mountain. You can take sannyasa, change the color of your cloth, but that will not bring about vairagya. The real renunciation is not changing the outward form of our life. It is letting go inwardly. So that is true vairagya. Bhagavan has defined vairagya in the 11th paragraph of Nana, Who Am I? He says, not attending to what is other is vairagya or nirasa. Nirasa means non-desire. It's a synonym for vairagya. So not attending to anything other than ourselves is vairagya. And then in the next sentence he says, not letting go of oneself is jnana. And in the next sentence he says, in truth, these two are one. That is, jnana and vairagya are one. In order to not attend to anything other than ourselves, we need to attend to ourselves. And not letting go of ourselves, that is jnana, and that is also vairagya. Because by not letting go of ourselves, we are thereby refraining from attending to anything other than ourselves. We may not be able to achieve that immediately because we lack sufficient vairagya, but we need to cultivate that vairagya by practicing this more and more and more, trying to turn our attention within more and more. The more we attend to ourselves, the more we strengthen the love to be self-attentive, and thereby weaken the Vishaya Vasana, the inclination to attend to anything other than ourselves.
Can I just ask you just to
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit more on the second thing he said about not letting go of ourselves?
Not letting go of ourselves means not allowing our attention to move away from ourselves.
Okay, got it. That's clear.
Yeah. There was one illiterate village woman called Akilandamaya. She first came to Bhagavan in the very, very early days when he was living on the hill. I can't remember exactly what year, maybe 1903, 1904. And till I mean, whenever she lived in a village, some 50 miles or so from Tiruvannamalai, and she was a child widow. I think she'd been married at the age of 5 or something, as often happened in those days. But and her husband also would have been a child, but he passed away, and so she was a widow. So according to the customs in those days, a widow couldn't remarry. So she was a lifelong widow, and she was very, very poor, from a very, very poor family. And so whenever she could save, she could save up some money, as she would buy food and things. She'd walk all the way to, because in those days there weren't buses and things. She'd walk to Tiruvannamalai, and she'd come and she'd cook and feed Bhagavan. So she had great devotion to Bhagavan. But of course, she knows nothing about these teachings or anything, but she noticed that people were coming and asking Bhagavan questions and he was giving answers. So she thought she somehow had a feeling that she was missing out on something. And one day, I think it was a full moon day, someone advised her, today is a full moon day, it's a very auspicious time. Why don't you ask Bhagavan for some upadesha, for some teaching? So she approached Bhagavan and asked him. And the teaching he gave to her was Une Vidamal Iru. That means be without letting go of yourself. She said, many years later, when she told this to Sadhu Om, she said she didn't, the words didn't, she didn't understand the meaning of the words, but those words had such a calming effect on her mind. Those words have been in her mind ever since then. So Bhagavan's words sometimes have that power to bring about that inner transformation, even for someone who is not able to understand the meaning of the words themselves have that power to bring about that inwardness. But those three words, Unne Vidamal Iru, that means, Unne means you, yourself, Vidama means without leaving or without letting go of, Iru means be, so be without leaving yourself. That is the essence of all of Bhagavan's teachings. Not letting go of ourselves means not ceasing to attend to ourselves.
And isn't that the truth of knowing?
Yes, knowing other things is not true knowing. True knowing is being what we actually are. And Bhagavan, in Upadesha verse 26, Bhagavan says, Tanai iritle tanne aridlam. Being oneself alone is knowing oneself. Because oneself is not two. Knowing anything other than ourself is a mental activity. Because our attention is going out and we're knowing something other than ourselves. But we know ourselves not by any act of knowing, but just by being ourselves. Because what we are is awareness, and awareness always knows itself. So just being as we actually are, that means being without rising as ego, being without seeking to know anything else, that is knowing ourselves.
Michael, thank you so much.
Right. Well, all thanks to Bhagavan, because these are all Bhagavan's words. I'm just relaying what he has taught us.
That totally says it all, doesn't it, Michael?
It does.
Anyone else have something to say, something to add to the conversation? Something to ask, Michael? Annette?
Thank you, Mickey. Thank you, Michael. I'm
Yes.
grateful to be here live. It's my first time enjoying the conversation. It's something that's, I keep, questioning the question. So I'm just gonna throw it out, and because it seems so simple, and I just want to not be so concerned about my face, the mask. So, which is just, this self-investigation. I've heard it in so many forms in different spaces, and where it's led to has really been like to just mental masturbation, just constant, like the opposite of what I think the purpose of it is, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you can maybe throw out some examples, in general,
Okay.
Yeah.
Bhagavan has given a very simple definition of what he means by self-investigation. he says always keeping the mind on oneself, always fixing the mind on oneself is alone self-investigation. Fixing the mind on ourselves means fixing our attention on ourselves, which is very simple. But in order to understand what this means, we need to understand what we are. If we take ourselves to be the person we seem to be, this body, we can attend to this body. That is not attending to ourselves, because this person is not what we actually are. We are also not the mind. We are not the thoughts. We are not anything that appears or disappears is something other than ourself. So we are the space of awareness in which all things appear and disappear. So when we attend to ourselves, we are not attending to any object, any phenomena. We are attending to the background, as it were, to that awareness in which all these things appear and disappear. It's a very, very simple practice, but it's also subtle. So it requires a certain subtlety of understanding in order to grasp what is meant by these words. Do these words I said, did these have any meaning to you? Or don't hesitate to say if it's not clear.
It's very clear. And what the head is saying, I'm going to, that's how I refer to it. The head is, in a practical sense, when you're in life and you're doing, tending to your, bodily responsibilities. How do you pay attention to the background? Like,
okay, whatever you may be doing, your being is the being is the ground of all doing. Without being, you couldn't do anything. So we get caught up in all the things that we're experiencing, all the phenomena, and we overlook the background. We overlook ourselves, the one to whom all these things are appearing, the one who is experiencing all these things. So it is a matter of remembering to hold on to ourselves. The life goes on, it goes on automatically. If you consider in the course of a day how many thousands and thousands of thoughts we have, how many of the thoughts that we have are actually necessary? For example, if you're driving a car, you're driving from A to B, how much of your attention is on the when you reach your destination? If someone asks you, did you stop at the red traffic lights? You'll say, I can't remember, because the driving of a car is going on almost on autopilot. You're so accustomed to driving, it requires very little attention. It almost happens automatically. But while driving, you're thinking so many thoughts about so many other things, about what you have to do the next day, the problems at work, problems of family, this thing, that thing. 99% of the thoughts that we have each day are actually unnecessary thoughts. So in all the time we spend attending to unnecessary thoughts, if we attend to ourselves, our work will go on perfectly, just like our work goes on perfectly in spite of our mind wandering here and there. So this need not interrupt anything that we are doing. The work can go on, but we hold on to that background awareness of our being, which is ever present, but we overlook it. Just like if we go to a cinema to watch a film, we sit there for 2 or 3 hours looking at a screen, But we hardly notice the screen. Well, probably we don't notice the screen at all because we're only interested in the pictures. But actually what we're looking at all the time is the screen. So we just need, it's all a matter of interest. The reason we constantly attending to other things, thinking about other things, is because we're so interested in them. Unfortunately, we're not yet sufficiently interested in knowing what we actually are. If we really had that interest, that passionate love to know ourselves, we would be constantly attending to ourselves. But we lack that, so practice is necessary. If we try to hold on to that self-attentiveness throughout the day, we'll find our attention keeps on getting diverted away towards other things. So we have to bring it back to ourselves. Whenever we notice it slipped away, we bring it back to ourselves. And we shouldn't get discouraged, but we'll probably find by the end of the day, we set out to attend to ourselves 99% of the time. We may end up, if we attend to ourselves 1% of the time, that's a great achievement. But we shouldn't be disheartened, oh, I'm making no progress. Every moment of self-attentiveness is a big step in the right direction. So we should treasure every moment of self-attentiveness. And we shouldn't worry about all the times that we fail to attend to ourselves. Is that a helpful answer?
100%. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Mhm.
And Bruce had his hand up. Bruce, did you have?
Yeah, I was just cross-referencing a couple of different translations of verse 30 of Uladu Narpadu. And if you don't mind, I'll read both your translation, Michael, and Robert Butler's. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Robert Butler's is as the mind seeking, this is verse 30 of Uladu Narpadu, which is 40 verses on reality, the text of Bhagavan's. As the mind seeking inwardly through the inquiry, who am I, reaches the heart, and as the one known as I bows its head in shame, the one appears spontaneously as I am I hyphen I in this case. However, that which appears is not the I of the ego. It is the perfection of the real. It is the reality, which is the self. And then the translation, most recent one that I have of yours is, as soon as the mind reaches the heart, inwardly investigating, who am I, when he who is I dies, one thing appears spontaneously as I am I. Though it appears it is not I, it is the whole, the entire substance, the substance that is oneself. I mean, that's a pretty pretty profound verse.
Yes, it is very profound. And we also need to understand what it means. For example, when he says, it is not I, he means it is not ego.
Exactly.
It is
yeah.
what we actually are. It is, as he says in Upadesha, that is always the true import of the word I. Because of the absence of our non-existence in sleep, which is devoid of I. When he says which is devoid of I, he means devoid of ego. So we don't cease to exist in sleep, even though ego is absent. Therefore, that is always the true import of the word I. So what I actually refers to is our being, which exists and shines whether ego appears or not.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, I just was gonna say, like, so there's analogy of a lot of different bowls on the ground filled with water, and that they reflect the sun, right?
Yes.
So each of these represents, an individual, I guess.
Yes.
But the reality behind the idea of the individual is one.
Yes.
And that reality is the self. And that the confusion of ego is that separate, we are separate from the one self.
Yes.
And so this idea of like in the Butler translation, and it's a very interesting phrasing, the bowing of one's head in shame. That is what he's trying to make a comment on, which through a colloquial expression, bowing the head, is the death of the I sense, the ego sense.
Yes. Actually, there's the term Bhagavan uses here is tale nanamura, which literally means head attaining shame. In the equivalent verse in Upadesha Undiyar, he uses the term nan tale saindidam. Tale saindidam literally means head bowing, but that's a colloquial term for dying. Just like in English we say he kicked the bucket. That's a colloquial way of saying, or he croaked or something. There's so many colloquial ways of saying it. This is a very colloquial usage.
Bought the farm.
But Bhagavan uses it very, very beautifully here. And I mean, there in Upadesha Undiyar, he says it bows its head, which, as I say, is a colloquial way of saying it dies. Here, he says the head attains shame. That implies it bows with shame. But what it means is it dies. It ceases to exist.
And isn't this the unlearning or the
This is the ultimate unlearning.
Right.
That all unlearning leads to this.
Right. This is the turning to what is.
Yeah. That's why
and
he
not
says
not what seems to be, or
that's why he says it is not I, meaning it's not ego. It is the it is the whole substance, the substance that is oneself. In other words, it is the reality. And pundram means whole, full. It implies infinite. It doesn't literally mean infinite, but it implies infinite.
And I think it's been said the knowing is the unknowing.
Yes. Well, what we are to know is what we always know. What we are to unknow is what we have superimposed upon that. What we always know is I am, but we've superimposed on that I am the false awareness. I am Mickey, I am Michael, I am Bruce, I am whoever. That is what we have to unknow. We have to cease knowing that, and then what we always know alone will remain. That is I am.
And therein ends the separation.
Exactly.
And allows the wholeness, the oneness.
Yes, exactly.
Daniel has the hand up.
Hi, Michael. Can I have one more question, please?
Yes.
I will say something from Paramount Importance of Self-Attention from Sadhu Om.
Yes.
And I would like to have some clarification on that line, if it's okay.
Yes.
Okay, so when Bhagavan was asked, why should we attend to the first person or Atman? He replied, If you do not attend to the first person, you attend to second or third person instead. If you do not do Atma-vichara, you do Anatma-vichara. Neither is necessary. To be is not doing, not attending.
Yes, yes. That ultimately we go beyond the need for any Atma-vichara, but Bhagavan makes it clear, so long as we raise as ego, Atma-vichara is necessary, because the nature of ego is to be constantly engaged in anatma-vichara, or avichara as he also called it. That is, we're constantly attending to things other than ourselves. So long as we have an inclination to attend to anything other than ourselves, we need to attend to ourselves. When we attend to ourselves keenly enough, ego will subside and dissolve, and we will remain a pure being, which is beyond beyond any need for vichara. That is the aim of vichara, is to be as we actually are. Once we are as we actually are, that is, our real nature doesn't need to investigate itself. But as ego, we do need to investigate ourselves. Is that clear?
Yes, so basically, Michael, we can't just be doing nothing, because if we do nothing, we do Anatma-vichara. We have to just look within.
Yes. There's a verse in that I was just talking about yesterday when I was talking with the Houston group, verse 30, I think it is, of Uludunapdu Anabandam, in which Bhagavan says, just like someone who's listening to a story when their mind has gone far away, though they're seemingly listening to a story, they're not actually listening to it because their mind has gone far away. Likewise, those in whom all vasanas are destroyed, though doing is not doing. That is, though they seem to be doing, they're not doing. Those in whom all vasanas are destroyed means vijnani. And then he says, the other side of the story, those whose mind is soaked with vasanas, even though not doing, they are doing. And he gives an analogy for that. Though the body is lying here motionlessly on the bed, in a dream we climb up a hill and fall into a pit. So so long as ego is present, there'll be vasanas. And so long as vasanas are there, there's the doership. So even if we're doing nothing, I am doing nothing, that is the doership is there. But we need to go beyond doing or not doing by just being as we are. Is that clear?
Yes, Michael, thank you. It's clear.
Yeah, yeah.
Sadashiva had the hand up.
Well, hello, Michael.
Hello.
My question was, by way of Atma-vichara, if we're able to permanently abide in the self, when we open our eyes and see the Maya, would there be a distance or a non-attachment to what we're seeing?
Abiding in the self, or more precisely, abiding as the self. In other words, being as we actually are.
Yes.
Then that is the state in which we do not rise as ego. When we do not rise as ego, there are no eyes to open or nothing to see. When we are aware of opening our eyes and seeing something, we have already risen as ego, so we're not being as we actually are.
So are you saying it's not abiding in self, there would no longer be the appearance of Maya?
No. Maya is nothing but ego or mind. So all this is nothing. That's why Bhagavan says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what this ego is giving up everything. That's what he says in verse 26 of Uludunapadu. So when we investigate ourselves as ego, we as ego subside and remain as pure being. That is the state of Atma-vichara, self-abidance. That's being as we actually are. Then there's nothing else to know.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Self-abidance means being as we actually are. That is brought about by attending to ourselves. The more keenly we attend to ourselves, the more we subside. And when we subside completely, that is being as we actually are. That is self-abidance.
And can we be other than we actually are?
We are always as we actually are, but we seem to be something other than what we actually are because we've risen as ego. But when we know ourselves as we actually are, we'll know we always were as we actually are, and we always knew ourselves as we actually are.
Michael, is it possible to go through life without rising as ego and still viewing the appearance of Maya?
If we don't rise as ego, there's no Maya at all, no appearance at all. That's what Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uludunapti, but I just quoted. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. We can see
So
it from...
the illusion of Maya, of physical matter, does not exist anymore.
No, we can see it from our own experience. In waking and dream, we rise as ego and we see the appearance of the world. In sleep, we do not rise as ego. We don't see any appearance.
Deep sleep.
Deep sleep, yeah, deep sleep. So it's only all the world, all phenomena appear only in the view of ego. It's only when we rise as ego that we are aware of anything other than ourselves. That's why he says he concludes that verse 26 of Uludunappu by saying, therefore know that investigating what this is, meaning what this ego is giving up everything. Because to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego subside. And when we subside, everything subsides along with us. Because everything exists only in the view of ourselves as ego. That's why he says for example, in the fourth paragraph of Nana, when Swarupa is seen, when Swarupa means our real nature, what we actually are, when Swarupa is seen, the world is not seen. And when the world is seen, Swarupa is not seen. When we see the snake, when we see the rope as a rope, the snake isn't seen. When we see the snake, we are not seeing the rope as it actually is. Is that clear?
Yes.
But that is not saying that the rope is not there. The rope is not true.
The rope is always there. Even when we see it as a snake, it's always only a rope. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 37 of Uludunapadu, even to say duality during practice and non-duality after attainment is not true. Because who else is one but the 10th man, both when one is anxiously searching for the 10th man and when one finds oneself to be the 10th man. That's a story that is often used to illustrate how we overlook ourselves. That is, the story goes that there were 10 foolish men who were going on a pilgrimage or going to some destination, and they had to cross a river. And after crossing the river, just to be sure that all of them crossed safely, one of them counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, we're only 9. What's happened to the 10th person? And then the next person started counting. Everyone counted only 9. And then they all started weeping. Oh, we've lost our friend. We've lost the 10th man. And a passerby came and he asked, why are you weeping? They said, oh, we're 10 people and we crossed the river and now we're only 9. And the passerby saw there 10 people. So he said, okay, let's count again. I will tap you with a stick and you count. So he tapped the first person 1, second person 2. When he tapped the 10th person, 10. Oh, we found the 10th man, they rejoiced. So what Bhagavan says in that verse, both when we're anxiously searching for the 10th man and when we find ourselves to be the 10th man, we're always the 10th man. So even when duality seems to exist, non-duality alone is the truth.
Well, let me say, Michael, that your prarabdha karmas are benefiting the world.
It is whatever benefit we get from Bhagavan, it's ultimately it's his grace, but it's the prarabdha karma is the fruit of the action we have performed in the past. So whatever we experience in this life is the fruit of our own the fruit of actions that we've done in the past. So Bhagavan sometimes may seem to give us help through one means or another, but ultimately it's all coming only from him. So my role is incidental. It's not, that is not important. It just so happens Bhagavan has, he's using me for a certain purpose.
This is your seat on the bus, Michael.
Well, yeah, it's all his grace only. Who am I? Who am I? I'm nothing. I cannot save myself. How can I help others? I'm a drowning man who cannot swim. So I'm depending on Bhagavan's grace. We're all depending on Bhagavan's grace. He alone can save us.
And I thank you, Michael. I thank you so very much.
Well, all thanks to Bhagavan, because everything is happening by his grace. Whatever help we are receiving on this path is all entirely his grace. Everything that happens in our life, both the things we consider good and the things we consider bad, all is his grace. So all is ultimately for our own good.
And it's all good.
It's all good. And the greatest good is when we subside. And that is what his grace is leading us towards.
And that's what I perceive as love.
That is love. That grace is just another name for the infinite love that Bhagavan has for us as himself. Because in his view, we are nothing other than himself. And so he loves us as himself. That is infinite love. And that infinite love that he has for us as himself is what we experience as his grace. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachala Ramanaya.